I never imagined that a simple Tuesday afternoon would shatter everything I thought I knew about my place in this family. The smell of fresh coffee still lingered in my kitchen when I overheard my 8-year-old grandson Tommy talking to his younger sister in the living room. His words hit me like a physical blow. "Grandma Dorothy says Nana Carmen doesn't really belong here because she's not actually family. She said Nana was adopted, and that's why she looks different from everyone else." My hands started trembling as I gripped the granite countertop, feeling the cold stone anchor me to reality while my world tilted sideways. 51 years of believing I belonged, of never questioning my mother's love or my place in the Lopez family, crumbled in an instant. If you enjoyed dramatic life stories like this one, smash that like button and subscribe. Tell us where you're watching from. Because what happened next turned my entire understanding of family upside down. My name is Carmen Lopez. I'm 51 years old, and I thought I knew exactly who I was until this moment. The voice I'd just heard belonged to my own mother, Dorothy Martinez, who had been babysitting my grandchildren while I prepared their afternoon snack. At 74, my mother had always been the cornerstone of our family gatherings, the woman who taught me how to make her famous empanadas and told me stories about our ancestors from Mexico. Now, I was learning she'd been using that trusted position to poison my grandchildren against me with lies about adoption and belonging. My heart hammered against my ribs as I processed what I'd heard. Dorothy had raised me as her own daughter, celebrated every birthday and milestone with fierce pride, and never once mentioned adoption in 5 decades. The confusion felt suffocating. Why would she tell the children such a devastating lie? And why now, when our family felt stronger than ever? I forced myself to walk calmly into the living room where my mother sat on the burgundy sofa, her silver hair perfectly styled as always, reading a magazine as if nothing had happened. Tommy and his sister Maya were playing with blocks on the carpet, their innocent faces showing no understanding of the bomb their grandmother had just dropped into our family. "Mom, can I talk to you in the kitchen for a minute?" I managed to keep my voice steady, though inside I felt like screaming. Dorothy looked up with those familiar brown eyes that I'd always thought matched mine. "Of course, mija. What's wrong? You look upset." The casual endearment that had always made me feel cherished now felt like another lie. I waited until we were alone before confronting her, my voice barely above a whisper to avoid the children overhearing. "Mom, I just heard you telling Tommy and Maya that I was adopted, that I don't belong in this family." "How could you say something so cruel to them?" Instead of the shocked denial I expected, Dorothy's face hardened in a way I'd rarely seen. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she crossed her arms defensively. "They have a right to know the truth, Carmen. I've protected you long enough." The words felt like ice water in my veins. "Protected me from what? What truth? You're my mother. You gave birth to me. I have my birth certificate with your name on it." "Documents can be changed," Dorothy said coldly. "Your real mother was my younger sister, Rosa. She got pregnant at 16 and couldn't keep you. I took you in, but you were never really mine. Rosa died when you were 5, and I decided to let you believe you were my daughter, rather than tell you the truth about being unwanted." I stumbled backward, reaching for the kitchen chair to steady myself. Every family photo, every shared memory, every moment of feeling loved and secure was now tainted with this revelation. "Why are you telling me this now? And why did you tell the children first instead of me?" "Because they deserve to know they have a grandmother who isn't really their grandmother. I'm tired of pretending, Carmen. I'm tired of you acting like you own this family when you're just someone I took pity on." The cruelty in her voice was devastating. This wasn't the woman who had kissed my scraped knees and cheered at my graduation. Something had changed in Dorothy. Something dark and bitter that was now directed at me with laser focus. Just then, I heard the front door open and my son Miguel's voice calling out, "Mom, I'm here to pick up the kids." Miguel Lopez, my 28-year-old son, worked as a contractor and always stopped by after job sites to collect Tommy and Maya. His timing felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. I couldn't let him walk into this nightmare unprepared, but I also couldn't fall apart in front of the children. My mind raced with questions that had no answers. Was any of this true? Had Dorothy really raised me believing I was her daughter when I was actually her niece? And if so, why was she choosing now to weaponize this information against me through my own grandchildren? Miguel appeared in the doorway, his work clothes dusty and his face brightening when he saw us. "Hey, Mom. Hey, Grandma Dorothy. How are Tommy and Maya today?" His easy smile faltered when he noticed my pale face and Dorothy's rigid posture. "Everything okay?" Dorothy straightened, smoothing down her blouse as if preparing for battle. "Actually, Miguel, there's something you should know about your mother. Something I should have told you years ago." I felt panic rise in my throat. She was going to destroy my relationship with my son right here, right now, in front of the children who were wandering into the kitchen looking for their father. The family I'd built, the love I'd cultivated, the security I'd provided for my grandchildren, all of it was about to be shattered by a woman I'd trusted completely. The trap I'd missed finally sprang shut, because the truth about Dorothy's motives was far more twisted than I could have imagined. "Miguel, don't listen to another word," I said quickly, stepping between Dorothy and my son. But she was already moving around me, her eyes fixed on Miguel with that same cold determination I'd just witnessed. "Your mother isn't really my daughter," Dorothy announced, her voice carrying the weight of someone delivering a verdict. "She's my niece. I took her in when she was 5 after her real parents died, but I never legally adopted her. She's been living a lie her whole life." Miguel's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, then something that looked almost like relief. "Grandma Dorothy, what are you talking about? Mom, is this true?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. The kitchen felt like it was spinning around me. Tommy and Maya had wandered closer, sensing the adult tension, but not understanding it. Tommy, at 8, was old enough to pick up on the serious tone, while 6-year-old Maya just looked between the adults with wide, uncertain eyes. "Daddy, why does everyone look mad?" Maya asked, tugging on Miguel's work shirt. Miguel knelt down to her level, his contractor's hands gentle as he smoothed her hair. "Nobody's mad at you, sweetheart. The grown-ups just need to talk about something important." He looked up at me, and I saw my son's protective instincts kicking in. "Mom, kids, why don't you take Tommy and Maya to the living room? Put on that cartoon they like." But Dorothy wasn't finished. "Miguel, I want you to understand something. I've been carrying this burden for 23 years, pretending Carmen was my real daughter when she was just a charity case. I thought you and your sister deserved to know the truth about your family." The words hit Miguel like a physical blow. I watched my son, this man who'd inherited my tendency to think before reacting, process what Dorothy was saying. "Grandma Dorothy, even if that's true, she's still my mother. She raised me. She's the one who taught me to ride a bike and helped with homework and came to every baseball game." "But don't you see?" Dorothy pressed on, her voice getting higher. "Everything about your family history is a lie. Those stories about when your mother was little, the family traditions, even the recipes I taught her. None of it really belongs to her." I found my voice finally. Miguel, I don't even know if what she's saying is true. This is the first I'm hearing any of this. My hands were shaking as I reached for Tommy's shoulder. Come on, kids. Let's go watch TV like your dad suggested. But Tommy, ever the curious 8-year-old, had been listening intently. Grandma, great. What's a charity case? And why are you being mean to Grandma Carmen? The innocence in his question seemed to snap something in Dorothy. For just a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman who had raised me, the grandmother who had baked cookies with these children just hours ago. But then her face hardened again. I'm not being mean, Tommy. I'm telling the truth. Sometimes grown-ups have to hear things they don't want to hear. Miguel stood up slowly, and I could see the contractor in him, the man who solved problems methodically. Okay, everyone needs to take a breath. Maya, Tommy, go sit on the couch. I'll be right there. His voice had an authority that even Dorothy seemed to respect. After the children reluctantly left the kitchen, Miguel turned to face both of us. Grandma Dorothy, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Dorothy lifted her chin defiantly. Ask whatever you want. Why now? Why are you telling us this now? And why did you start with Tommy and Maya instead of coming to Mom directly? The question hung in the air like a challenge. I watched Dorothy's face, seeing something flicker there that looked almost like guilt. But then her jaw set in that stubborn line I'd grown to recognize over the past hour. Because I'm 78 years old, Miguel. I don't have forever to set the record straight. That's not an answer, Miguel said quietly. That's an excuse. I felt a surge of gratitude toward my son, but also a growing dread. Dorothy's behavior wasn't just cruel. It was calculated. She had chosen to tell the children first, chosen to wait until I was here to witness the fallout, chosen to make this revelation in the most devastating way possible. Miguel, I said carefully, there's something else you should know. When I got here today, Tommy told me that Grandma Dorothy had been telling them I don't really belong in the family. Miguel's face darkened. She what? I never said that exactly, Dorothy protested. I just explained that families are more complicated than children understand. To an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old? Miguel's voice was rising, despite his obvious efforts to stay calm. Grandma Dorothy, those kids adore their Grandma Carmen. Why would you put that kind of confusion in their heads? For the first time since I'd arrived, Dorothy looked uncertain. She glanced between Miguel and me, and I could see her realizing that her revelation wasn't having the effect she'd anticipated. Miguel wasn't turning against me. He was questioning her. I thought they deserved to know the truth about their family, she repeated, but her voice lacked the conviction it had held earlier. The truth? Miguel stepped closer to Dorothy, and I could see the anger building in him. The truth is that my mother has been the most loving, dedicated parent and grandparent I've ever known. The truth is that she's been there for every important moment in my life and my children's lives. The truth is that you just tried to destroy that relationship based on something that happened before I was even born. Dorothy's face was flushing red. Miguel, you don't understand. There are things about this family, about your mother's past, that you don't know. Then tell me, Miguel said simply. But tell me everything, and tell me why you thought hurting my children was the right way to start this conversation. I watched this exchange with a mixture of pride in my son and growing fear about what Dorothy might reveal next. Because looking at her face, seeing the desperation creeping into her eyes, I was beginning to suspect that her motivations for this revelation ran much deeper than she was admitting. And what she said next confirmed my worst fears about why Dorothy had chosen to destroy our family's foundation on this ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Dorothy's hands trembled slightly as she looked between Miguel and me, her composure finally cracking. "Your mother never told you about the money, did she?" The words hit the room like a physical blow. I felt my stomach drop, and I saw Miguel's confusion deepen. "What money?" Miguel asked, his voice cautious now. Dorothy's eyes fixed on me with something that looked almost like triumph. "The inheritance money. From your grandfather's will. The money that was supposed to go to the biological family members only." I closed my eyes, feeling the ground shift beneath me. This wasn't just about adoption anymore. This was about something I'd buried so deep, I'd almost convinced myself it didn't matter. "Mom?" Miguel's voice was quieter now, uncertain. I opened my eyes and looked at my son, this man I'd raised, who had every right to know the truth. "There was money," I said slowly. "When your grandfather died, there was a provision in his will about adoption. A provision that excluded adopted children from the inheritance," Dorothy said, her voice gaining strength again. "But somehow, Carmen still received her portion." Miguel looked back and forth between us, trying to piece together what this meant. "I don't understand. If Grandpa's will said adopted children couldn't inherit, then how did Mom get anything?" The silence stretched between us. From the living room, I could hear Tommy's voice explaining something to Emma about his video game, their innocent chatter a stark contrast to the tension suffocating the kitchen. "Because," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper, "nobody knew I was adopted when your grandfather died. The family lawyer, the courts, everyone believed I was his biological daughter. Only Dorothy knew the truth, and she didn't say anything until after the will was settled and the money was distributed." Dorothy's face was flushed now, years of resentment pouring out. "I kept quiet because I thought it was what Dad would have wanted. He raised you as his daughter, loved you like his daughter. But watching you get that money, knowing it was meant for his real children, it ate at me for years." "So this is about money?" Miguel's voice was sharp with disbelief. "You're poisoning my children's relationship with their grandmother over money from 20 years ago?" "It's not just about money," Dorothy snapped. "It's about honesty. It's about family. It's about the fact that your mother has been living a lie her entire adult life." I felt something break open inside me, a dam of guilt and fear that I'd been holding back for decades. "You're right," I said, and both Dorothy and Miguel turned to look at me in surprise. "I have been living with this secret. Every day since your grandfather died, I've wondered if I deserve that inheritance. I've wondered if I should have given it back when I found out Dorothy knew the truth." Miguel stepped closer to me, his anger shifting to concern. "Mom, why didn't you ever tell me about this?" "Because I was terrified," I admitted, tears finally starting to fall. "I was terrified that if people knew I was adopted, if they knew about the inheritance issue, they would see me differently. That you would see me differently." Dorothy was watching this exchange with an expression I couldn't quite read. Some of the anger had faded from her face, replaced by something more complicated. "But here's what I don't understand, Dorothy," I continued, wiping my eyes and looking directly at her. "If this has been bothering you for 20 years, why are you bringing it up now? Why tell the children? What changed?" Dorothy's mouth opened and closed, and for a moment she looked lost. Then her expression hardened again, and I realized we still hadn't reached the bottom of whatever was driving her actions. "Because," she said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. I need that money back, Carmen, and I need it now. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Miguel's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then a dawning understanding that made my stomach clench. You need the money back? I repeated slowly. Dorothy, that inheritance was distributed 20 years ago. I used it to help buy this house, to pay for Miguel's college, to... I know exactly what you used it for, Dorothy interrupted, her voice taking on a desperate edge I'd never heard before. And I know it's not just sitting in a bank account somewhere. But Carmen, I'm in trouble. Real trouble. From the living room, Emma's laughter at something Jake had said provided an almost surreal backdrop to this conversation. The normalcy of their childhood innocence felt like it was happening in a different world from the one we adults were navigating in this kitchen. Miguel pulled out one of the kitchen chairs and sat down heavily. What kind of trouble, Aunt Dorothy? Dorothy remained standing, her hands gripping the back of another chair so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The kind that means I might lose my house? The kind that means I made some very stupid financial decisions and now I'm paying for them. I felt a mix of sympathy and anger warring in my chest. So you thought the best approach was to turn my grandchildren against me? To make them think I don't belong in this family? I didn't mean for it to go that far, Dorothy said, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she looked genuinely ashamed. At first, I just thought maybe if I could make you feel guilty enough, you'd offer to help. I mentioned to Emma once that families are complicated, that sometimes people aren't who they seem to be. Miguel's face darkened. You manipulated a 7-year-old. It snowballed, Dorothy admitted. Emma kept asking questions, and Jake overheard one conversation, and before I knew it, they were asking me directly if Carmen was really their grandmother. I panicked and told them the truth about the adoption, but I may have emphasized certain aspects. I sank into the chair across from Miguel, trying to process this revelation. So the money troubles came first, and then you decided to use my children's love for you as leverage to get to me? Dorothy's face crumpled slightly. When you put it like that, it sounds horrible. Because it is horrible, Miguel said flatly. Whatever financial trouble you're in, there had to be better ways to handle it than this. From the living room, Jake called out, Mom, can we have a snack? In a few minutes, honey. I called back, grateful that my voice sounded steadier than I felt. I turned back to Dorothy. How much money are we talking about? Dorothy looked uncomfortable. Enough that it would make a real difference. I know you don't have the full amount just sitting around, but even a portion would help me negotiate with my creditors, buy me some time to figure things out. Miguel leaned forward, his elbows on the kitchen table. And you thought the best way to ask for help was to hurt Mom's relationship with her grandchildren first? I thought if she understood that the inheritance was never really rightfully hers, she'd feel obligated to help, Dorothy said quietly. Your grandfather left that money to his children. I was his biological daughter who got nothing extra, while she got what should have been part of my share. The old guilt rose up in my throat again, but this time it was accompanied by something else, a clearer understanding of what had really happened. Dorothy, your father knew I was adopted when he wrote that will? She looked up sharply. What? He knew, I repeated. The lawyer told me years later, after Dad died, that he'd specifically asked about the legal implications of including adopted children in inheritance language. He chose the wording that would include me deliberately. Dorothy stared at me, her mouth slightly open. But you said nobody knew. I said nobody knew when the will was read and the money was distributed, I corrected. I didn't know. You didn't know. But Dad knew, and he made his choice anyway. Miguel was watching this exchange with intense focus. So Grandpa specifically wanted Mom to inherit equally? Apparently so, I said, though saying it out loud felt strange after decades of uncertainty. The lawyer said Dad had been very particular about the language, that he wanted to make sure all his children, biological or adopted, were treated the same way. Dorothy sank into her chair, as if her legs had given out. All these years, I thought. I was so angry, and I thought. You thought I had stolen something that belonged to you, I finished gently. I understand why you felt that way. There were many nights I wondered the same thing. The kitchen fell quiet, except for the distant sounds of Jake and Emma playing. Dorothy put her head in her hands, and I could see her shoulders shaking slightly. I've made such a mess of this, she whispered. I was so desperate and so convinced I'd been cheated that God, Carmen, what I said to those children. Miguel's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. The question now is how we fix it. Both the situation with Jake and Emma, and whatever financial trouble drove you to this point. Dorothy looked up, tears streaming down her face. I don't know if it can be fixed. The things I told them, the way I made them question their place in this family, and my financial situation is so complicated. I reached across the table and took Dorothy's hand, surprising all three of us. We're going to figure this out, I said. All of it. But first, you need to tell me exactly what kind of trouble you're in. Dorothy squeezed my hand, and I could feel her trembling. Carmen, there's more. The financial problems, they're not just bad investments or overspending. I did something that could get me in serious legal trouble, and I'm afraid it's going to come out, and when it does, it's going to affect all of us. I felt my stomach drop. Miguel leaned forward, his expression serious. What kind of legal trouble? Dorothy pulled her hand away from mine and wrapped her arms around herself. I've been taking money from my clients' trust accounts. Not all at once, just small amounts here and there. I kept telling myself I'd pay it back when things got better. But she trailed off, unable to meet our eyes. Oh, Dorothy, I breathed. As a paralegal, she had access to client funds that were supposed to be held in trust. Taking money from those accounts was embezzlement. How much? Miguel asked quietly. $43,000. Dorothy's voice was barely a whisper. Over the past 18 months, I kept meticulous records, thinking I could replace it all before anyone noticed, but there's going to be an audit next month. The senior partner mentioned it last week. I rubbed my forehead, trying to process this. This is why you've been so desperate about the inheritance money. I thought if I could get what was rightfully mine from Dad's estate, I could put everything back and no one would ever know. But when you wouldn't budge on splitting it, I got more desperate. That's when I started talking to Jake and Emma, thinking maybe if they understood the situation, they could convince you. Miguel shook his head. So you decided to traumatize two kids instead of just being honest with Carmen about your situation. I know how it sounds, Dorothy said, tears flowing freely now. But I was panicking. Do you know what happens to paralegals who steal from client trust accounts? I'd never work in law again. I could go to prison. I'd lose my house, my car, everything. I stared at my sister, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in years. Beneath all the resentment and manipulation was someone who was drowning and had made increasingly desperate choices. Why didn't you just ask me for help? I asked. Why all this elaborate manipulation with the kids? Because I was ashamed, Dorothy said. And because I convinced myself that the money should have been mine anyway, it felt easier to be angry at you than to admit I'd screwed up my life so badly. Miguel stood up and started pacing the small kitchen. Okay, so we have two problems. The immediate problem of what you've told Jake and Emma, and the bigger problem of the missing trust fund money. The audit is in 3 weeks, Dorothy said. Once they discover the discrepancies, it won't take them long to trace it back to me. I've been covering my tracks, but I'm not a forensic accountant. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw how thin she'd become, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her clothes hung loose on her frame. How long have you been carrying this alone? Since it started. Maybe even before it started, when I first realized I was in over my head financially. I kept thinking I could fix it myself, that I just needed time. And instead, you made it worse, Miguel said, though not unkindly. Much worse, Dorothy agreed. And now I've hurt Jake and Emma in the process. I've damaged their trust in their own family. I don't know how to undo that. The back door slammed, and we heard Jake's voice calling from the mudroom. Mom, can Emma stay for dinner? We want to build a fort in my room. Emma's voice followed. Please, Aunt Carmen, I can call my mom. I looked at Dorothy, who had gone pale. They sound happy, I said quietly. Kids are resilient, but this conversation needs to happen soon. I don't know what to say to them, Dorothy whispered. How do you apologize to children for poisoning their sense of security? Miguel sat back down. You start with the truth, age-appropriately delivered. You tell them you made a mistake and that you're sorry. But what about the trust fund situation? Dorothy asked. Even if we fix things with the kids, I'm still looking at potential jail time in 3 weeks. I took a deep breath. How much do you think it would cost to make this right? The $43,000, plus probably penalties and interest. Maybe $50,000 total, if the partners are willing to handle it quietly and not press charges. And you think they might be willing to do that? I don't know. I've worked there for 12 years. I've never had so much as a parking ticket before this, but embezzlement. Dorothy shrugged helplessly. Miguel caught my eye. Carmen, what are you thinking? Before I could answer, Jake appeared in the kitchen doorway, Emma right behind him. Mom, Emma says her grandma told her something weird about our family. Can we talk about it? The 3 adults at the table froze. Emma looked between us nervously, clearly sensing the tension in the room. What did Grandma Dorothy tell you, sweetheart? I asked, my heart racing. Emma glanced at Dorothy, then back at me. She said you're not really Jake's mom's sister. She said you're adopted, and that means you don't really belong in the family. But that doesn't make sense, right? Because you're still my aunt either way. Jake crossed his arms. I told Emma that was stupid. Being adopted doesn't make someone not family. But why would Grandma say something like that? Dorothy looked like she might be sick. I could see her struggling to find words, any words, that might begin to address what she'd done. Sit down, both of you, I said gently. We need to have an important conversation. But as Jake and Emma took seats at the table, Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and frowned. That's weird. It's a text from my mom, but she's at work. She says Grandma Dorothy called her and told her to come pick me up right away. She's on her way over now. Dorothy went completely white. I didn't call anyone. Miguel frowned. Then who did? My mind raced as I stared at Emma's phone. The text was clear enough, but something felt wrong about the timing and wording. Can I see that message? I asked Emma gently. She handed me her phone, and I read the text aloud. Emma, Grandma Dorothy called and said there's a family emergency. Come home right now. Don't ask questions. But I didn't call anyone, Dorothy repeated, her voice shaking. I've been sitting right here with you this whole time. Jake looked between all of us, confusion written across his face. So who sent that text? I felt a chill run down my spine as the pieces clicked together. Emma, does your mom usually text you during work hours? And does she typically tell you not to ask questions? Emma shook her head slowly. No, she always explains everything. And she never texts from work unless it's really important. Plus, she always uses my name differently. She calls me M or sweetheart in texts. Miguel leaned forward. Someone's trying to get Emma out of here. The question is who and why. This doesn't make sense, Dorothy said, wrapping her arms around herself. Who would even know Emma is here? And why would they want her gone? My protective instincts kicked in as I looked at both children. Jake had moved closer to Emma, and I could see the fear starting to creep into both their faces. Whatever was happening, they didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of adult complications. Emma, call your mom directly, I said. Don't respond to the text. Just call her and ask if she sent it. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she dialed. After a few rings, I could hear her mother's voice through the speaker. Hi, honey, what's up? I thought you were spending the afternoon at Jake's. Mom, did you just text me asking me to come home? There was a pause. No, sweetheart. I'm in back-to-back meetings until 5. I haven't texted anyone today. Why? Emma's face went pale. Someone sent me a text from your number saying you were coming to pick me up because of a family emergency. That's impossible. I have my phone right here, and I definitely didn't send any texts. Emma, stay exactly where you are. Don't go anywhere with anyone. I'm leaving work right now. The line went dead, and the four of us sat in stunned silence. Jake reached over and took Emma's hand. This is really scary, Emma whispered. Dorothy looked like she might collapse. This is my fault somehow. Everything that's gone wrong lately traces back to my mistakes. Dorothy, stop, I said firmly. You didn't send a fake text from someone else's phone. This is something else entirely. Miguel stood up and walked to the front window, peering out through the blinds. Carmen, there's a car parked across the street that I don't recognize. It's been there since we got back from lunch, but I just assumed it belonged to a neighbor. My heart started pounding. What kind of car? Dark sedan, tinted windows, the engine's running. Jake jumped up. Should we call the police? And tell them what? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm for the children's sake. That someone sent a suspicious text and there's a car on a public street? Emma's phone buzzed again. This time the message was different. Change of plans. Stay where you are. We're coming to get everyone. That's definitely not from your mom, I said, my mouth going dry. Dorothy stood up abruptly. The embezzlement case. What if the partners at the firm decided to handle things differently? What if they're not waiting for our meeting next week? You think they sent people here? Miguel asked, still watching the window. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. But the timing is too coincidental. Emma started crying quietly, and Jake put his arm around her shoulders. I want my mom, she whispered. She's coming, sweetheart, I said, moving to sit beside both children. And we're all going to stay together until she gets here. Miguel turned back to us. The car just turned off its engine. Someone's getting out. My blood turned to ice as Miguel's words sank in. The living room suddenly felt too small, too exposed, despite the drawn curtains and locked front door. Emma's quiet sobs seemed to echo in the heavy silence that followed. Get away from the window, I whispered urgently to Miguel. If someone's watching the house, we don't want them to see us looking back. Miguel stepped back from the blinds, his face grim. It's a woman, middle-aged, wearing a business suit. She's just standing beside the car, looking at the house. Dorothy sank deeper into the armchair, her face ashen. This has to be connected to the missing money. I should never have involved any of you. I should have just confessed from the beginning and taken whatever consequences came. Stop it, I said sharply, though I kept my voice low. We're in this together now, and beating yourself up isn't helping anyone. Emma looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I don't understand what's happening. Why would someone pretend to be my mom? What do they want? Jake squeezed her hand tighter. Maybe it's just a mistake. Maybe someone sent the text to the wrong number by accident. But even as he said it, his voice lacked conviction. The timing was too precise, too calculated to be a simple error. I moved closer to the window, staying well back from the glass, and peered through the gap in the curtains. The woman Miguel had described was indeed standing beside a dark sedan, but she wasn't looking at our house anymore. Instead, she was talking on a cell phone, pacing back and forth on the sidewalk with sharp, agitated movements. She's making a phone call, I reported quietly. She looks upset about something. Dorothy's hands were shaking as she clasped them together in her lap. What if the firm hired private investigators? What if they're building a case against me and they think you're all somehow involved? The possibility sent a chill through me. But that doesn't make sense. Why would they try to trick Emma into leaving? And how would they even know about her? Miguel rubbed his forehead, thinking. Unless they've been watching Dorothy, following her movements, tracking who she spends time with. If they saw her coming here regularly, they might think we're helping her hide assets or something. Emma's phone buzzed again, making all of us jump. This time, the message read, "Plans have changed. Everyone needs to come outside now. This is not optional." That's definitely not from my mother, Emma said, her voice barely audible. My mom would never write something that scary. I felt a surge of protective anger. Well, whoever sent it can wait out there all day. We're not going anywhere. Dorothy stood up abruptly, beginning to pace around the small living room. Maybe I should go out there. Maybe I should just talk to whoever it is and find out what they want. If this is about me, then I need to face it. Absolutely not, Miguel said firmly. If these people are willing to impersonate someone else and send threatening messages to a teenager, they're not exactly operating above board. You don't negotiate with people like that alone. The woman outside had finished her phone call and was now walking slowly toward the house. Her movements were deliberate, confident, like someone who was used to getting their way. Emma gripped my arm. What if they try to break in? What if they hurt us? They won't, I said, hoping I sounded more certain than I felt. We're going to stay calm and stay together. Your mom will be here soon, and if things get worse, we'll call the police. Dorothy stopped pacing and looked at all of us with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I just wanted to fix my mistake quietly, without hurting anyone. You couldn't have predicted this, I assured her. Whatever's happening here, it's not normal procedure for an embezzlement case. This feels personal somehow. Miguel nodded grimly. The question is, personal how? And personal to whom? Outside, the woman had reached our front walkway. Through the thin curtains, we could see her shadow approaching the front door. My heart hammered against my ribs as we all held our breath, waiting. Then came 3 sharp, authoritative knocks that seemed to shake the entire house. The knocking stopped, and for a moment, the silence felt even more threatening than the sound had been. I found myself frozen between competing instincts. Part of me wanted to confront whoever was out there, to demand answers and protect my family, while another part wanted to hide until they went away. My mind raced through possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. If this really was connected to Dorothy's situation at work, why the elaborate deception with Emma's phone? Why not just approach Dorothy directly? The whole thing felt calculated in a way that made my skin crawl. I thought about how Dorothy had looked when she first arrived at our house, defeated and ashamed, but not frightened. Now she stood by the window, her entire body tense with fear. Whatever was happening had escalated far beyond what she'd expected when she decided to confess about the money. Emma was still gripping my arm, and I could feel her trembling slightly. I realized that in trying to be supportive of Dorothy, I might have put my own daughter in danger. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. What kind of mother was I, allowing strangers to threaten my child because I wanted to help a friend? But even as I had that thought, I knew I couldn't regret opening our home to Dorothy. She'd made a mistake, yes, but she was trying to make it right. The alternative, leaving her to face this alone, wasn't something I could live with. The woman outside had moved away from the front door, but I could still see her shadow moving around the yard. She seemed to be checking the windows, looking for weak points or ways to see inside. "She's not leaving," Miguel observed quietly. "Whatever she wants, she's not going to give up easily." I found myself thinking about my mother's lies about my adoption and how they'd made me question everything I thought I knew about my place in the world. Now, sitting in my own home feeling trapped and uncertain, I realized how much those lies had damaged my ability to trust my own judgment. Was I overreacting to the situation? Or was I not taking it seriously enough? Dorothy moved away from the window and sat down heavily on the couch. I keep thinking about what Miguel said, about them watching me. If that's true, then they know I've been coming here. They probably know about both of your families now. The weight of that possibility settled over me like a heavy blanket. "But we haven't done anything wrong," I said, as much to convince myself as anyone else. "Even if you took money from the company, helping you return it isn't illegal. Unless they think we're somehow involved in the original theft," Miguel pointed out. "If they believe we've been helping Dorothy hide money or assets, they might see us as accomplices rather than just friends trying to help." Emma's phone buzzed again, and this time she nearly dropped it. The message read, "Time is running out. Last chance to cooperate before things get complicated." "I don't understand what they think we're supposed to cooperate with," Emma said, her voice shaking. "We don't even know what they want." I felt a surge of anger at whoever was doing this to my daughter. Emma was barely 18, still figuring out her place in the world, and now she was being dragged into some kind of corporate nightmare that had nothing to do with her. "Maybe that's the point," I said slowly. "Maybe they want us confused and scared. People make bad decisions when they're frightened." Dorothy looked up at me with something like admiration. "You're right. They want us to panic and do something stupid. But what happens if we just don't? What if we refuse to play their game?" Miguel walked to the front window and carefully peered through a gap in the curtains. "The woman is on her phone again, and there's a second car pulling up now." My heart sank. Whatever was happening, it was getting worse, not better. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even tell them? That someone had sent my daughter misleading text messages, and was now standing in our yard. It sounded paranoid, even to me. Emma stood up suddenly, her jaw set with determination that reminded me of myself at that age. I'm going to call my mom for real this time. Not through texts, but actually call her. If these people are pretending to be her, then she needs to know what's happening. That's actually a good idea, Dorothy said. If your mother really is safe and unaware of this situation, then we'll know for certain that someone else is behind the messages. As Emma started to dial, I found myself holding my breath. Part of me hoped her mother would answer and be completely confused about the texts. But another part of me worried about what we'd do if the call didn't go through, or if whoever answered wasn't really Emma's mother. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, someone picked up. "Hello?" came a voice that made Emma's face go completely white. "That's not my mom," Emma whispered, pulling the phone away from her ear. "That's the woman from outside." The blood drained from my face as Emma's words sank in. I stared at the phone in her trembling hand, my mind racing to process what this meant. If the woman outside had somehow intercepted Emma's call to her mother, then we were dealing with something far more sophisticated and dangerous than I'd imagined. "Hang up," I whispered urgently. "Hang up right now." Emma's finger stabbed at the screen, ending the call with such force I worried she might crack it. Her breathing had become shallow and rapid, and I recognized the signs of panic setting in. "This doesn't make sense," Emma said, her voice barely audible. "How could she answer when I called Mom's number? How is that even possible?" Dorothy moved closer to us, her business background clearly helping her think through the technical aspects. There are ways to redirect phone calls, especially if someone has access to certain equipment or has compromised the phone system somehow. This isn't just some random harassment anymore. I felt my protective instincts surge as I watched Emma struggle to understand what was happening. She was trying so hard to be brave, but I could see the fear creeping in around the edges. This was exactly the kind of situation that could shake someone's faith in their ability to trust their own judgment. "What I don't understand," I said, keeping my voice steady for Emma's sake, "is what any of this has to do with us. Dorothy, you said these people think you stole something from your old company, but Emma and I don't work there. We don't have access to anything valuable." Miguel had been quietly observing from his position by the window, but now he turned back to us with a grim expression. "Maybe that's not what this is really about. Maybe the company thing is just a cover story." "What do you mean?" Dorothy asked. Miguel hesitated, as if he wasn't sure he should voice his suspicions. "What if someone is using Emma to get to you?" he said, looking directly at me. "What if this whole thing with Dorothy's former employer is just a way to create chaos and confusion while they focus on something else entirely?" The idea hit me like a physical blow. All of my mother's poisonous words about how I didn't belong in the family came rushing back, along with the lingering insecurities they'd created. But this time, instead of feeling sorry for myself, I felt furious that someone might be targeting Emma to hurt me. "But what could anyone want from me?" I asked. "I'm not wealthy. I don't have access to corporate secrets. I don't have any information that would be valuable to anyone." Emma looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mom, what if this isn't about money or business at all? What if someone is trying to break up our family?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I found myself thinking about all the recent stress with my mother, about how isolated I'd been feeling, about how vulnerable Emma and I had both been to manipulation and doubt. Your grandmother, I said slowly, the pieces starting to come together in my mind. Emma, when did you first start getting those text messages? Was it before or after the big fight with my mother about what she'd been telling you? Emma's eyes widened as she realized what I was suggesting. You think Grandma is involved in this somehow? I don't know, I admitted. But the timing seems suspicious. And your grandmother has always been good at finding ways to create drama and division when she feels like she's losing control. Dorothy frowned, clearly trying to follow our logic. You're saying you think your mother might have hired these people to harass Emma? That seems pretty extreme, even for someone with serious family issues. Miguel moved away from the window and joined our circle. Or maybe your mother just provided information to someone else. Maybe she doesn't even know what it's being used for. I felt a chill as I considered the possibility. My mother knew details about Emma's life, about her routines, about her relationship with her father. If someone had convinced her that she was helping in some way, or if they'd simply manipulated her own resentments, she might have shared information without realizing the consequences. Emma's phone buzzed again, and we all froze. She looked at the screen, and her face went pale again. It says, "We know you're all together now. This is your final warning. Come outside, and we can resolve this peacefully." The four of us looked at each other, and I could see my own fear reflected in their faces. Whatever was happening, we'd reached a critical moment. The people outside weren't going away, and they seemed to know exactly what we were doing inside the house. We need to make a decision, I said. We can't just hide in here forever. But even as I said the words, I realized I had no idea what the right choice was. Going outside felt like walking into a trap, but staying inside might only be delaying the inevitable. Miguel stepped closer to us, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. Before we do anything, we need to think this through logically. These people know too much about your family situation. The connection to your mother isn't just a coincidence. I pulled out my phone, my hand shaking slightly. There's only one way to find out for sure. I scrolled through my contacts and found my mother's number. Mom, you're going to call her now? Emma asked, her eyes wide. If she's involved in this somehow, I need to know. I pressed the call button and put it on speaker so everyone could hear. The phone rang 3 times before my mother answered. Sarah, this is unexpected. I thought you weren't speaking to me. Mom, I need you to answer something honestly. Have you talked to anyone about Emma and me recently? Anyone you don't normally talk to? There was a long pause. What kind of question is that? Just answer me, please. This is important. Dorothy moved closer, listening intently, while Miguel continued watching the window. Emma grabbed my free hand. Well, my mother said slowly, there was that nice woman who called last week. She said she was doing some kind of family research project and had heard about our family situation. She seemed very understanding about everything I've been going through with you. My heart sank. What exactly did you tell her, Mom? Nothing bad. I just explained how you've been keeping Emma away from me, and how you've never really understood your place in this family since you were adopted. She was very sympathetic. She said she was trying to help families reconnect. Emma squeezed my hand tighter, and I could see the anger building in her expression. Did you give her any specific information about where we live, where Emma goes to school, anything like that? I asked. She already seemed to know those things. Look, Sarah, what's this about? You're scaring me. Miguel turned from the window, shaking his head grimly. The people outside are using the information your mother gave them to intimidate you. They're probably hoping to create more division in your family. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. That woman wasn't trying to help. Someone has been following Emma and sending threatening messages. They used the information you gave them. That's impossible, my mother said, but her voice had lost its defensive edge. She was so nice. She said she just wanted to help heal our family problems. Emma couldn't contain herself any longer. Grandma, do you have any idea what you've done? I've been terrified for days because some strangers know everything about my life. Emma, sweetheart, I never meant for anything bad to happen. I thought I was helping. Dorothy placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. Mrs. Williams, right now we need you to think carefully. Did this woman ask you to do anything else? Did she give you any way to contact her? She said she might call back if she had more questions, but that was almost a week ago. I felt a mix of anger and disappointment, but also a strange sense of relief. At least now we understood how this had started. Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully. If anyone contacts you again asking about Emma or me, you don't talk to them. You hang up immediately and call me. Do you understand? Yes, but Sarah, I really thought I was doing the right thing. Ever since our fight, I've been so worried about losing both of you forever. Emma looked at me with tears in her eyes, and I could see she was struggling with her own emotions about her grandmother. We'll deal with the family stuff later, Mom. Right now, Emma and I are in a potentially dangerous situation because of the information you shared. Miguel moved back to the window. The car is still there, but I think we need to make a decision soon. We can't stay locked in here indefinitely. Dorothy nodded in agreement. And now that we know how they got their information, we can be more strategic about how we handle this. Emma wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. What if we call them out on it? What if we go outside and tell them we know they got their information from Grandma, and that whatever they're trying to accomplish isn't going to work? I looked at my brave daughter with admiration. That's actually not a bad idea. If we show them we understand their game, they might realize the intimidation isn't working. I'm still on the phone. My mother's voice came through the speaker, sounding small and worried. What can I do to help fix this? For the first time in our conversation, I heard genuine remorse in her voice instead of defensiveness. Just promise me you won't talk to any strangers about our family again, Mom. And maybe we can work on talking to each other directly instead of through other people. I promise, Sarah. I'm so sorry. Emma looked at the phone, then at me. Grandma? When this is over, maybe we can all sit down and talk about everything that's been happening. All of us together. I'd like that very much, Emma. I ended the call and looked around at the 3 people who had become my support system in this crisis. Despite everything that had happened, I felt stronger knowing the truth and having them beside me. So, I said, are we ready to go face whatever's waiting outside?